Now, I have been reliably informed that curses are not real, but then again, neither is professional wrestling, and I've seen an awful lot of that over the course of this life. Ergo, reality is merely a perception, the truth is out there, wake up sheeple, please subscribe to What Culture, etc, etc. While this joyous hobby of ours prides itself on being as close to genuine sport as it possibly can be, it seems to attract a level of supernatural coincidence not seen in any other pursuit. Partially because it likes to make them up for ratings, but partially because they just sort of happen in ways that they absolutely should not happen. Now, I'll level with you here, if you're after a slapstick time as we laugh heartily at some bad booking and embarrassing misfortune, you're in the wrong list. Curses, as anyone who has seen The Mummy or The Mummy Returns will tell you, tend to get a bit deathy. Now, I mean, obviously I'm going to be dunking on the Universal title at some point, but fair warning, there's some heavy stuff in here too. Got it? Good. My name is Adam Cleary, and these are 10 wrestling curses. Number 10, the Von Erich family curse. A ghastly and statistically irreconcilable wave of death. To put into perspective how awful the Von Erich story is, consider this bone-chilling quote from Kevin. "I used to have 5 brothers, now I'm not even a brother myself." The first of the clan to die was Jack Jr., who at the age of 16 suffered an electric shock and drowned in a puddle outside the family home. Years later, in 1984, with 3 of the children riding high as athletic tough guy heartthrobs, David passed away in Japan amid whispers of panicked drug flushings, but pronounced formally as enteritis. The death plunged the family into a terrible sequence of tragedies, as Mike, Chris, and Kerry all died by suicide in later years. If a brain-damaged Mike had no business returning to the ring after his life-altering bout of toxic shock syndrome, Chris had no business even entering it in the first place. He was asthmatic and his bones were so brittle that he could barely bump without breaking them. He couldn't be a pro wrestler, and in his mind, that's all being a Von Erich was. Kerry, in a state of overwhelming grief and imminent trouble with the law, was the last of the clan to die in 1993. Number 9, the Hart family curse. The children of the Hart family were all the direct or indirect victims of tragedy. The sad reality, based on the extent to which pro wrestling was awful, and I mean yes it still is now, just in different ways, is that statistically a family of that size where so many of them are involved in the industry was always going to encounter the bad stuff in magnitude. To start at the top, Owen Hart was tragically and needlessly killed in 1999. Legal have advised me not to go into too much detail here, but let's just say unsuitable equipment was used to facilitate a stunt that was in no way necessary. While Brett escaped tragedy of that scale, he was still concussed into a grim retirement, throughout which he suffered significant health issues. The cursed DNA also extended out by law through the marriages of Davey Boy Smith and Diana Hart, and Dynamite Kid and his wife Michelle. Bulldog died of a heart attack at only 39, while Michelle endured a disturbing cycle of physical and psychological abuse. Most recently, Tyson Kidd, who married into the family through Natalia, had his career ended with a freak injury from a move that had been safe for years. Number 8, the Armstrong family curse. Bullet Bob Armstrong was a pro wrestling legend and impossibly tough bastard. He once wore a mask to conceal a hole where his nose used to be, while still wrestling through surgeries that reconstructed his entire face. Also, he sired 4 sons. Between them, their respective characteristics made up a megastar. Brad was the workhorse, Brian the charismatic talker, Scott the hoss, and Steve the stud. Crucially though, none of them was ever considered the full package alone, and that meant that no member of the Armstrong family ever won a meaningful match on television from the mid-90s onward. Bemoaning his luck backstage, Armstrong Sr. claimed the Armstrong sons were cursed. WCW's dismal creative heard him and decided to make it canon, meaning he effectively willed his own curse into existence. Finally though, at WrestleMania 14 in 1998, Brian, as the Road Dogg, wore a t-shirt emblazoned with "Look Mom, no curse," before then losing his tag team titles to Cactus Jack and Chainsaw Charlie. Whoops. Number 7, the 4th of July curse. Adrian Adonis was a flamboyant, sleazy, prodigious heat-seeker when he was alive, but he died in a road accident so mysterious that a mythology has blossomed around it, involving the blinding Canadian sun and a stationary moose blocking the road on July the 4th. Eerily, exactly a year later, another vehicle crammed with professional wrestlers swerved off the road in a non-fatal crash in the same country, caused indirectly by the same animal. Chris Benoit was mildly injured, but Jason the Terrible and Davey Boy Smith, who required 135 stitches after crashing through the windshield and flying 25 feet onto a concrete pavement, were seriously hurt. On the same day in 1990, Brutus Beefcake's facial skeleton was crushed in a frightening, paralysing accident that removed 3 years from his in-ring career. Then 4 years later, WWF referee Joey Morella, the adopted son of Gorilla Monsoon, was killed in another car accident. Number 6, the modern lineage of the Impact Wrestling World title. We're taking a turn for the macabre here and into the curious, coincidental and or perversely hilarious. The lineage of the Impact Wrestling World title starts off well enough, even if the first holder Kurt Angle was stripped of it within a day just to then win it back. For years, the title was a modest success, but more recent holders have painted a less than stellar image of the company as a whole. They range from talents who couldn't wait to get the hell out of there, like Pentagon Jr., Brian Cage and Johnny Impact, to, let's just call them more problematic, questionable attitude types who brought the entire company into further disrepute. Alberto El Patron, Tessa Blanchard, Austin Aries, we're looking at you. It's possible to curse oneself, of course, and Impact realistically must have known that far from booking themselves into a corner, they were actually doing it directly under a ladder. Number 5, the lineage of the NXT Cruiserweight Championship. A plague, this belt, a goddamn plague! Inaugural holder TJ Perkins contrived to get himself sacked in an era when WWE was intent on hoarding every available talent on the face of the planet. Then Rich Swann fell afoul of the company after an allegedly very ugly domestic violence incident with his partner. Neville's contract was frozen for almost a full year after he walked out on the company. Enzo Amore was booted out of the door and tried to get back in hilariously, while Akira Tozawa is a ninja now, and he's fared better than most. Cedric Alexander was subsequently buried deep into the solid inner core of the planet, otherwise known as main event, but the switch to NXT, Jesus, those who have held the cursed silver have either been accused of awful abusive behaviour, been released, or just pretended to be released in order to stop genuine firings from getting the airtime to bury the company. In short, best of luck, Mr. Escobar, you are going to need it. Number 4, the Royal Rumble curse. Now, 14 isn't an exciting number in the Royal Rumble. I mean, it's not 1 or 30 or 2 or 27 for some reason, but it is said on message boards the internet over to be cursed. You see, 14, with a disturbing frequency, is the man wrestling no longer has much use for. The man whose push has long since been abandoned. 14 is Rikishi, 4 years removed from his dancing days. 14 is Umaga, a year past his peak as a monster. 14 is MVP, Chris Masters and Orlando Jordan, all of whom were released within a year of using it. And when wrestling has no use for you, it has an awful habit of lulling the downtrodden into its voracious maw. Several of the men who have drawn 14 have then died prematurely or struggled with substance abuse issues. Eddie Guerrero and the British Bulldog, to name but 2. Even otherwise happily retired people like DDP and Kevin Nash endured awful personal luck after their 2010s nostalgia pops from that number. Even Shinsuke Nakamura, the man who won from number 14 in 2018, then went on to have the most critically derided and career-killing main event feud ever seen in the company. Number 3, the SmackDown vs. Raw curse. Death once haunted professional wrestling with such totality that it was impossible to escape even in virtual reality. In SmackDown vs. Raw 2006, Chapter 2 of the game story mode, Earning Your Respect, you see, spelt with a U, very good, involves Eddie Guerrero stealing The Undertaker's urn and controlling him with it. As vengeance, Taker slams Guerrero onto a casket with a chokeslam, and the game was released on the 11th of November 2005, 2 days prior to Guerrero's tragic death. Then in SmackDown vs. Raw 2007, in the first story mode chapter, The Rabid Wolverine and the Dead Man, The Undertaker makes what is retrospectively a very unsettling reference to Chris Benoit's death. And I'm talking one more explicit than just his trademark catchphrase here. Again, this is less a wrestling curse and more that just wrestling itself is a curse, but hey, if you were John Cena, the man in pretty much all of 2008 story mode, you would have been looking both ways before crossing the road. Number 2, the WWE Universal title. Right, yes, here we go. I've got the ball. There's a good screen pitched under the hoop. My trainers have giant springs on them. It is time for that dunk I promised you about 10 minutes ago. The first winner of the Universal title, Finn Balor, however, had to immediately vacate it after suffering a labrum tear at SummerSlam 2016, and it hasn't really got much better ever since. This belt is either cursed or just a visual representation of what, in terms of popularity, is a catastrophic era for WWE. I'll let you decide. The title was subsequently won, and I wish you could see the size of the air quotes I'm doing, by Kevin Owens in order to build towards Triple H versus Seth Rollins. He then got squashed by Goldberg, who was a lot of fun admittedly, before giving way to Brock Lesnar, whose stranglehold on the title scene created this vast yawning chasm from which most wrestlers were unable to escape. Now, Seth Rollins did break the wildly counterproductive holding pattern, but not the curse, since he made a spectacular tit of himself on Twitter and then had to transition into a profoundly obnoxious heel as penance. But of course, not before defending the thing against The Fiend in the most cursed match of all time. Wait, no, sorry, got that wrong. The second most cursed match ever, as he dropped it to Goldberg in WWE's Ultimate I Cannot Believe What These Idiots Are Actually Doing contest ever recorded. Mercifully, they didn't bother defending it in the swamp. Number 1, Papa Shango curses the Ultimate Warrior. Finally some kayfabe bullshit here to finish us off. To the adults watching it back, it's a curse, alright. It's as dumb as it is horrific, with sprinkles of genius that temporarily rid us of its own putrid stench. After celebrating a win on Superstars, Papa Shango, who possessed the ability to curse his fellow wrestlers but apparently not to locate a wrestling ring, seemed to cause gripping pains within the Warrior by shaking a smoking skull and making his eyes go a bit funny. The Warrior was rushed backstage and attended to by medical personnel. There he vomited what was meant to be bile, but I mean, not to spend too much time on this, it's just pea soup, isn't it? It is entirely, irredeemably awful, but it has developed a nostalgic, so bad it's good aura to it. Not unlike wrestling itself, actually, which, as you all now know, is the biggest curse of all. So there you have it, those are 10 creepy wrestling curses, or something, read to you by a man whose only real curse is just these boyish good looks. Let us know what you made of it all in the comments below, and of course don't forget to like, share and subscribe, not only here, but to our dedicated horror channel, which is full of other cursed things. But in the meantime, thank you so much for watching. I have been the haunted shell of Adam Cleary, today and every day, and I'll see you soon. Goodbye.